My Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you all on this wonderful day here in the UK, and from what I can see, a hot and humid Sydney in Australia. Be wonderful if you could all kind of just say hello in the chat and just let us all know where you're from. Inverness, Scotland, lovely. Been a while since I've been to Inverness, but there's got people from all around the world here today, so it's lovely to say hello. Whilst we're just seeing who else is going to join us, and we've got a couple of people here from our team. We've got Riska and Adam, who are people who know everything about our sales process. So they're the people to talk about if you want information about our courses. We've got Charlene and we've also got Julian, I think, here as well. So I'm just looking around to see who is on there on my little squares in front of me. So we do have people here from our team. Lovely to see so many people coming in now. And of course, we've also got my co-host for today, JP, who is certainly here to go through this with us. So gosh, lots of people from different areas. And there's Spain as well, wonderful. We've got Spain, we've got Portugal, UK, Malaysia, it's all over the place. It's really nice. And yes, being wonderfully British, we're being someone from Iraq, hello, welcome. Ukraine, hello. So welcome from wherever you are in the world. Just suffice to say, we're here to talk to you about EMDR, to get you, hopefully let you find out a little bit about what we're about with regards to our training. We'll talk about that towards the end, but really what EMDR is, how powerful EMDR is. We're looking at, I'm just getting a basic understanding of how it works. We hear a lot about EMDR, but what actually is it? So JP and I are here to kind of give you that experience, that overview, and of course, we do like questions. What we would ask for you is that regarding the questioning, if you could either drop a question into the chat whilst we're talking, and we will see them pop up there, or if you want to interact as a human being as well, then just use the hands up facility. We'll see that, and we can invite you to come in and ask your question using your voice. So as I say, we do UAE as well. Wonderful. Delhi, wonderful. But before we start, let me just briefly introduce me. My name's obviously Peter Mabbott, you can see it up there. I'm the academic head for the LSCCH. I've been a practicing therapist since the mid-1990s. Originally trained in hypnotherapy, but have many other therapies under my belt. And like JP, who'll introduce himself as well, I now kind of consider myself an integrative psychotherapist as well, on top of everything else that I do. And I've been working with EMDR since the end of the 1990s. To put it into a perspective, I wrote and developed the course that we teach, which we've been teaching probably since the form, the final form that we've been evolving since starting at since the year 2000, I would imagine. I use it quite extensively in my practice. I do work a lot with trauma and a lot with non-traumatic presenting issues that EMDR can work with, and we'll talk about that. I'm not going to say too much more about me. I'm going to introduce JP, who's sitting there on my screen to my left. So JP, say hello to everyone.
Hello everyone, my name is John Paul Higgerson, John Paul or JP, and I've been with the LSCCH now for over 2 decades. I started off my training in clinical hypnotherapy and have picked up lots of other courses since, such as the ego state work, the EMDR work, and the addictive behavior and psychology. Name a few. I've used all these techniques, they interblend, and EMDR, it was new to me. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. And it is fascinating, it is very powerful and has many, many uses. And I've found it wonderfully useful to have as a standalone therapy as well as an integrated one. Yeah. I look forward to having your questions and chatting to you later.
Thank you. Thank you. So, I mean, we hear a lot about EMDR. We hear a lot about how powerful it can be. I will say there are a small element of controversy over it. Anyone who reads the literature, there are a few people out there who don't rate it very much. But having used this for, well, as I say, since the end of the 90s, I am totally convinced as to how powerful this particular technique is. So the one question that I think we'll start with, JP, is what is EMDR? I mean, what's your perspective on what you think of EMDR? Oh, I don't think you're muted. Okay.
My apologies. I looked at that as well and I thought I'd unmuted it.
Usually my trick. Usually my trick.
Yeah. So EMDR is, at its very basic, a way of unblocking trapped trauma and emotional states in the brain, so they're allowed to come through and be processed in a healthy manner. It doesn't have to be just trauma, can be used for positive emotions and positive outcomes immediately as well. But yeah, no, it is a matter of using eye movement and bringing up images that then help elicit this change, which happens rapidly and is lasting. That is a very brief overview of how it is. I know Peter will want to go into more detail of how it works properly. But,
I mean,
yes,
one of the things that you said there was about the emotion. And as we know, emotion can be attached to belief, can drive belief, can drive negative belief, can also drive positive beliefs. One of the really nice elements within EMDR is that we can challenge negative beliefs about the self. So what EMDR does is it will go into the mind, into the unconscious mind, where we have trapped a particular trauma, along with its component parts. We'll have a little breakdown of the component parts that we can work with there, and actually unblock it. I used to refer to it as Dino-Rod for the brain. Dino-Rod in the UK, fairly well known. They're drain cleaning. They unblock drains. And the way I felt it, what it always reminded me of when using EMDR, it's almost like you're going in with this big brush and just gently and effectively clearing out a blockage within the mind that's preventing a form of, or that's preventing any form of processing of a traumatic experience. And I think, you know, when we look at it It was developed way back in 1987 by someone called Francine Shapiro. Unfortunately no longer with us, but Francine Shapiro was working with Vietnam War veterans and people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And we've got to remember, back in 1987, our understanding of PTSD and trauma was very much more basic than we have that understanding now. And as the story goes, basically she was pondering over a particular issue she had with one of her clients, or it's just an issue, and she went out for a walk, and she was walking through the campus under some trees, and like here in the UK at the moment, brilliant sunshine. She was walking along, and as she was walking under the trees, the light flickering through the leaves of the trees got her eyes moving backwards and forwards. And what she recognized there was that as her eyes were moving, so she was processing a lot of the this issue that she was coming or pondering, and she came out with a resolution for it. So being a brilliant scientist that she was, she started to explore this. She first came up with something called EMR, eye movement reprocessing, and then it expanded into eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which when you look at what it is, that is what it really is doing. It's got psychodynamic elements in it, certainly has huge elements of psychodynamic approach within it, as you're processing, you're understanding, you're learning, you're reconceptualizing your experience. But also it's got the behavioral aspect of desensitization, standard desensitization approaches. It's also desensitizing the anxiety, it's desensitizing the traumatic experiences of fear and anything else that might be there. So eventually we had this thing called EMDR. You've got the elements of CBT in it because we're challenging negative beliefs. To bringing in, I believe I am a bad person because of what happened to me in the past. In EMDR, we challenge that. I believe that I'm dirty because I was involved, I was responsible for encouraging that person to abuse me. We can deal with, help the client to deal and challenge and reprocess those particular beliefs to something healthy. So it looks at many different elements. It's also got an element of body-centered therapy in it as well, because what we're looking at with body-centered therapy is emotion, is sensation that gets stuck within the body. And part of the processing with EMDR is we look, when you think about this particular thing, where do you feel it in your body? And we understand and we connect with the fact that there are different elements there. JP, anything you'd like to add into that?
I think you've about covered it all, but yes, it is really an all-encompassing therapy, and in a way that's different from most. So it really does. You go through those stages and you help the person process them. So the healing work goes on many different levels. So it's not just how they feel emotionally and then how they believe about themselves, it's how they would like to believe about themselves. And as Peter said, removing any physical sensations that come from that negative memory, thought or belief. And so it wraps up so much. And it's something very special to experience, and it's certainly something very special to work with.
And the interesting thing I've often found with it, that's within the psychodynamic aspect of it, you have a client who presents, and it's very client-centered, client-directed. It's one of those therapies where you as the therapist are not saying very much. Literally, you're doing the processing with the stimuli that we'll talk about in a minute. And after each set, you just say, what comes into your mind now? And the client tells you, and you say, stay with that. So it's very, very client directed. And what I found that is so empowering is it gently peels away layers of trauma, of upset. And many times I've had the client, and I'm sure JP, you've had the same experience, who comes in with presenting symptom X, and as they peel away the layer of X, they discover Z right down there that they didn't even realize was there. Now, remembering we as therapists are not directing them to find it, the mind is opening up and going to the real center of it. And for people, when we work with EMDR, we've got several different points that we focus on. Standard element we're looking at, I've got a traumatic experience. So I ask my client, as you think of that experience, what's the most disturbing image that comes into your mind from that experience? So we're looking at an image, a disturbing image. Then as they look at that image, what negative feelings, emotions do they feel with that? As they look at the image and the feeling, what negative belief do they feel about themselves now? If you think of that, what do you believe about yourself? And then we ask them, as you think about that negative belief, what would you like to believe instead? So you get a positive belief. And after all of that, we then say, you think about that image with those feelings and that negative belief. I'd just like you to scan your body and notice what you feel, and let me know if there's anything that you'd like to share with me. So we get the physical aspect of it. So those are your classic standard points that we will work with and we process through with EMDR. And JP and I will be sharing towards the end as well a little bit more about our clients and elements there that have come up when working with them. But to also put it into more technical set, I've got a quick PowerPoint that I'd like to share with you that kind of just goes into a little bit about where we're thinking EMDR works. So what we're thinking is happening is when somebody gets a traumatic experience, it gets locked into the mind. And in in inverted commas, healthy functioning individual, the traumatic experiences will be slowly reprocessed naturally over time. But for some individuals, we don't know who they are. We don't know why. There are lots of theories as to why they don't process. There's no defining factor that we can see as to this person will get trauma and this person won't. So what we're looking at here is understanding that for some people, defense mechanisms block things away. Hello, I'm traumatized. I'm traumatized, let's push this all away, la 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 la, it's not affecting me type of mentality. So with EMDR, we think it works on this element called the adaptive information processing model, the AIP, or anyone reading around the subject will also see the older literature used to refer to it as accelerated information processing. So what this does is it will speed up in a safe way. I need to make sure you understand that in a safe way, it speeds up the processing of trauma. Basically, it gently unblocks the reintegration of dissociated material, not just gently, but quite rapidly as well. And in so doing, we've got the processing of emotions, beliefs, painful perceptions, painful meanings, lots of different cognitive and emotional elements that are coming up there. So what we think happens is when we're working with the mind, with a traumatic experience, if you think, right, this is the traumatic experience, you've not just got the traumatic experience, you've got all sorts of connected, what we would term memory channels. Channels are connected with each other. Channels are going in, you know, this might have the image, this might hold on to feeling, that might hold on to a particular belief because of that feeling. And that one then might be feeling something in the body, but because it's feeling it in the body, it triggers another belief and so on. So lots of associated memories, which can go back to some very positive memories on the outskirts of it. So these channels relate, as I say, memories, beliefs, images, you've got the emotions, you've got the sensations that are in there. Now, when we're working with EMDR, we focus on that most disturbing image. That's our target, as it's often referred to, but also it's referred to as the node or the target in a lot of the literature. And what happens is that, as I said, in a traumatized person, memory networks, they're blocked. So the reason the person has PTSD is you've got this element here that's the central part that they can remember, but there are all blockages within the memory networks. Some of them aren't blocked. Some of them get blocked quite a long way down. Whatever it might be, it's the fact that they're blocked, that this is what's triggering PTSD. Because they're blocked, always remember the brain really is looking for a natural, or really wants to get equilibrium and balance. And in so doing, it will try, these blocked elements will try and bring themselves into conscious awareness. And this is when flashbacks can occur, nightmares can occur, fears start to bring up, very negative beliefs, obsessive compulsive type of behaviors, all sorts of things come out because that material is trying to be recognized. And in EMDR, we've got the starting point, the node. And from that, we then start processing. And the processing classically uses visual, auditory, or kinesthetic stimuli. These are the classic ways of looking at them as helping to remove the blockages. Now, what we have here, you know, as I say, the classic ones, you've got the eye movement, EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. That's what was originally brought in. These are literally horizontal eye movements where the client keeps their head still in order to track with their eyes the therapist's finger or a pen or something like that, moving backwards and forwards about once a second. And it's thought that, I mean, there are many theories as to why this is why it processes, but there's a balancing of the two hemispheres within the brain. There is also a relaxation response that brings about reciprocal inhibition, so you can't feel fearful and relaxed at the same time. Therefore, without the fear, you process many different things that we explore within EMDR. So you've got the classic eye movements, but then as the process evolved, we recognize, you know, not everybody responds well to eyes. So we also, within EMDR, developed a hand tapping protocol where the hands are resting at either side, and the therapist gently taps on the back of the client's hands. But also there is the auditory stimuli where you get finger clicks, or you get a clicker and click in the client's ears. It's always a left and right, left and right. It's that backwards and forwards stimuli. Before anybody says so, there are obvious issues here with things like touching a client who's been traumatized, who might have been physically attacked or raped, sexually assaulted, being close to a client with that. So you have a different approach to look at in the moment. one thing about these particular stimuli is that you can alternate between the three of them in any one session. So they can be alternated between, if the therapist or if the client is perhaps getting fatigue in the eyes, then we can move on to one of the others. However, as we've evolved over time, there's also the butterfly hug that has been brought in or been developed. It was developed after in Mexico I can't remember the date, after one of the hurricanes. And they had groups of highly traumatized people, survivors of the hurricane, and they had group sessions for these traumatized people, and they developed this thing called the butterfly hug, which you can kind of see. The two hands are resting here around about the level of the shoulders, and they just gently, the client gently taps left and right as they go through the processing. So it's excellent for, as it says there, groups or online therapy, which is where I do 99.9% of my EM therapy now. But it's also great for somebody where actually doing a physical hand tap might be considered threatening. So it allows them to be able to do that processing, feel contained, and also there's that element of hugging yourself that many clients really like. It helps them to feel a little bit more a little bit more calm. And there are now a variety of technological-based solutions as well that can provide the stimuli. So headphones with a sound in left and right ear, dots on a screen that you track with your eyes. You can hold on to little buzz pads that do the kinesthetic stimuli by buzzing the palms of the hand. Many different ways of doing it. But what this is doing is it's looking into the node, that central point as the EMDR begins, so it opens up these memory networks. As the processes through, other networks open up, and eventually the material is reintegrated into the mind. It's a very simplistic way of looking at it. But we keep going back, opening up different channels, processing through until the client is feeling that they've come to a resolution with whatever it is that they're working with. And just to remind you, we've got to think that we are bringing in images, we are bringing in feelings, we're looking at beliefs, and we're looking at bodily sensations. And we have to remember that sometimes within the processing, we may have a client who's already processed one or two of these elements here, but still holds on to a negative belief. So we can just target a negative belief. And if there is anything else there, as we process through and unblock, so these other disturbing elements might come up. It's a very well-rounded approach to working with somebody. So, JP, anything you'd like to add to what I've been saying about your experience of actually connecting and working with these approaches? Personally, I love the butterfly hug now.
I predominantly use the end from side to side a lot, and always bring in butterfly hug as well. I think that's a really nice kind of aesthetic way to round things up towards the end of the session. Also, before we do anything with EMDR, we also teach a safe space, so that should the client find what they are going through a little bit too much at any point, they can at any moment raise their hand, and we can then just say, okay, few gentle breaths and just go to your safe space, allow them to calm down, and then we can pick that up. That's important to know. It is a very free-flowing way of working, as Peter said earlier, with unlike a fair amount of hypnotherapy, we have a rough idea. With this, there's no gauge in knowing where somebody's going to go to. And so I always try and prepare my client who's going to go through EMDR, that however you think it's going to be, it won't be. I can let them know about the basic premise of, okay, this is what we're going to work on, this is where we're going to start then, but where it goes from that, you have no idea as the therapist, and they have no idea. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we come to some cases just later, I think. But,
it's probably worth
yeah,
mentioning something now to colour it. I mean, I'll start off with one of mine, because as you were talking, I was just thinking, yes, I remember it was somebody who presented to me with, I used to live in London. I now live outside of London, but close enough to London that my clients still use the transport there. We have the tube system. And if you've never been on the tube system, you've basically got an underground tunnel with most of them around, with a train that goes through it that's very close to the tunnel walls. And there are many people who present with a fear or claustrophobic type response, a fear of the tube trains. And she, as is the case with many of our clients who have these type of phobic experiences, and hers was literally quite traumatic. You're like this, she couldn't go anywhere. She had to get into a position where she had to really start using the tube. She started to see somebody, and she got into a relationship, and the guy she was seeing lived outside of London. Now, she could catch buses and taxis to get there, but as she said, it would, it took forever to try and get there. And if I was taking a taxi, it would cost so much. The most direct route, which cut 3/4 of the journey off, is on the tube. And so we started working on the tube. And usual thing, is there anything, can you remember any traumatic experience or any reason why you have this fear? And she said, no, I have no idea. And so over a period of many sessions, I was processing, and she was going through the fear-related stuff, with what she was saying. I'm nervous, I'm tired, I'm holding on. And then I'm in a field and I'm with my family, I'm with my niece, and we're playing, and we're picking flowers. And you kind of see that. Now, I'm not making any value judgment on this, just saying, go with it. Then we go back and process through the whole process. And I remember thinking about the 5th session or something like that with her on EMDR. In the middle of the processing, she suddenly stopped and went, oh my gosh, I know where it comes from. Kind of looking at her. And all the way through, everything ended up with this field with flowers and the family picnic and her niece. And she said, I've just remembered where this has come from. I was a really young kid and I was watching television. A little bit of a warning for what we let our kids see on TV. And she said, I was only about 7 or 6 at the time, and there was a TV program on. And in it, there was a family and they were out having a picnic, and the little girl was playing and picking flowers. And she wandered off, and she she was wandering around, and it started to rain, and she saw a storm drain. And so she thought she would go into the storm drain and shelter from the rain. And she got stuck. And as she got stuck, the water was coming down the storm drain, and it was filling up, and she was going to choke. And that was the cliffhanger, and that's where the program ended. And she said, that terrified me as a child. I've only just remembered this. When I'm in a tube train, there's only a very small gap between the train and the wall of the tunnel. And she said, that is what's reminding me of, that is reminding me of that little girl And that's where my fear is coming from. And from that insight, and I mean, it was very rapid remainder of the processing, got her to, part of her homework assignment was to sit on tube trains and wander around reading, and totally changed her life. But it was many sessions picking it apart. She had no conscious awareness of it, peeled away the layers, and it all went back down to observing a child being stuck in a storm drain on a drama TV program. So might assume she'd had a nasty experience on the tube, had nothing to do with the tubes. So JP, have you got anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'd just like to add, yeah, the trauma sometimes that we work with, as Peter's pointed out there, it doesn't have to directly happen to the person. It can be something they've seen, something they've heard, something that's happened to somebody else that has just stuck with them. So they're not consciously aware of it at all. I had a client quite recently who her partner is long-term partner's autistic, and he had a bit of an episode of shouting. Neighbours called the police come round, wanted to charge him with assault and things. Nothing had happened. You know, I'm speaking to his partner here and things, and so he got really down over that and really upset, and she was overly worried, and she was terrified he was going to die. And because of that, she really shut herself off, and she wasn't going out. She was really struggling with thinking she was going to lose him constantly through suicide, because in the past he had said about suicide attempts, but he'd never done it, attempted it fully and things, and it went back years since he'd last mentioned anything like that. And so it all seemed a bit of, okay, well, this is all quite recent trauma. And so we started working on that, on how obviously they had the feelings that came, and these feelings of helplessness that she had. But once we started, she went back to the age of 14, when she was a schoolgirl, and she started off about her being bullied at school, and she was deeply unhappy. She felt as sad then as she did at the time, in recent time. And then she found herself at the point where her cousin had committed suicide. Now, she'd only met him twice, and she'd seen him a few months beforehand at a party, and he was sat there, and she was up and enjoying herself and dancing, and she felt guilt and remorse when the phone call came through that he'd killed himself, even though she barely knew him. And she carried that guilt, and her belief was that she should have done something. And parents and family never discussed him, so his name wasn't mentioned. And so she was left with those feelings. So when we processed that at its root core, and she changed her belief to, I couldn't have done anything, I was a child, and you know, and without going into too much details and things, it was that general side of things. She felt very different. There was lots of abreaction, lots of tears, and it helped her let all of that lot go, which when we spoke on our next session, I asked her, okay, so how are you feeling now? How's things, you know, with feeling about loss and grief, and your feelings of needing to be there for your partner, and it's just gone. So it had lifted all the other parts of it, and her partner had said to her, you know, look, you've changed, you seem more, you're less anxious. She'd been anxious for years, and very walled off, very didn't like getting close to people, and yeah, so it made a hell of a difference. And yeah, when we do that work in the past, it can have such a knock-on effect on other things. They might come up with 2 or 3 traumas that seemingly are unrelated, but if you can get to the root one, which they do, it's not us doing, as Peter pointed out, then those other things can sometimes seem a lot less. It's like, oh, I dealt with that okay, or yeah, oh, I could have done that one differently, but it doesn't bother me. And so it really does cause a big shift in people's belief system, just generally how they are within themselves once that process starts. I hope that makes sense.
It certainly does. Yeah, I mean, the one thing there is it's kind of, you often see preconceived ideas within our clients, the preconceptions suddenly breaking down, and they see the reality of where things are coming from. Many times I've seen that. Got a couple of questions. Moira, I'll answer your one in a moment, because I just want to answer Angeline's one. You might have seen me smile, Angeline, when you put that in, I saw it and smiled. Your question is the client in a trance when they see all these images? Welcome to the world of controversy. EMDR purists will have you shot at dawn for having said something like that. But anyone who works with altered states, my personal perception, my own personal experience of EMDR, having it done to me, is you do go into an altered state. So there is a link with an altered state within this, very, very much. So I will always say, yes, there is an altered state involved. It is the same state that anyone who's ever experienced hypnosis or mindful meditation or meditation, when you come out of EMDR, that sort of, oh gosh, you know, you do know you've gone through a process. Moira, you asked, would this be helpful for someone in grief if they're experiencing recurring images, painful images or feelings of guilt? Simple answer, yes. Now, the one thing with EMDR, we've got to remember with bereavement and the grieving process, it won't speed up natural grieving. It won't speed that up in the slightest. What it will do is where you've got something that's blocked, something that something that just is cycling round, that sense of being responsible, the sense of anger, the painful images that keep coming up. There we can use EMDR with those. So we can focus on the painful image, we can focus on the feeling of guilt, we can focus on anger, and find, you know, see where that goes. So it is very useful in those respects. With all EMDR is wonderful. It's a good therapy in its own right, but when we're looking at working with EMDR, it has to fit into a process of therapy. Rarely, if ever, do you go jumping in and say, on a first session, say, you know, hello, come and sit down, right? Follow my fingers with your eyes. It's like any form of analytical approach. You've got to stabilize the client that you're working with. You've got to do what you would normally do in the early stages of therapy, whatever discipline you work in. You then come in, do the processing with EMDR at an appropriate point. And once the processing is over, you then do another session or couple of sessions of follow-up to ensure, you know, the change is there and that you can maintain that particular change. So it's a rapid therapy, but it's not a very rapid therapy. So there's a lot that you go through this, and there are many different elements that they've developed protocols for. There's the trauma protocols, we've got phobia protocols, there are bereavement protocols, people working within pain management, whether it be psychosomatic or physiological pain. EMDR, there are protocols there because a lot of pain is perception. And with psychosomatic pain, there's no demonstrable physical cause. that's often, we think, something in the mind saying, hello, I'm in here, I need to be addressed and processed. So it goes in that, it presents itself as pain. So so we've got that, we've got OCD that we work with. There's protocols for smoking cessation, especially when the smoking cessation is or they're finding a big challenge in stopping smoking. Panic attacks, there's a very good protocol for panic attacks, working with panic clients. I do work within relationships, so it brings in, there are elements there to working with jealousy, working with the way one's feeling within a relationship breakdown. So there are many different elements now, and JP, you're integrative psychotherapist, so am I. You can also, if you're doing things like family systems therapy or ego state work, which is all about dissociation, you can branch off from what you're doing with those dissociated states, bring in some EMDR and go back. CBT, if you find a client is particularly stuck on a particular belief system, you can bring in EMDR to see if you can unblock that that element there. Or psychodynamic work, pure psychodynamics, where you've got somebody who perhaps is trying to get down to the root of what they're experiencing, but keeps coming out with blanks. This is where things like EMDR come in. It integrates superbly with different different mindsets, different approaches rather. And Andrew is also saying there, in that altered state, are the brainwaves alpha as when someone's in meditates? Yes. Even going down to the theta state. But the altered state for hypnosis, for meditation, for deep prayer as well. Malaysia just come out of Thaipusam, was yesterday or the day before. What day were we on? Wednesday. It was on Monday, wasn't it? I was very privileged to be present at the Batu Caves once, where people were entering into altered states, and basically going through honoring the deities, sticking pin or metal rods through their tongues, hooks into their flesh, not seeing any pain, any discomfort. So if you were looking in the brain, it's the same level as we would see within EMDR, within meditation, within hypnotherapy or hypnosis, and all of those. So it's a very similar thing. It's just what we know, what we do with it that changes. And I've got a question there. May I know, by using this approach, once recovered, will the problem recur in the future, or shall I say, how long can it be effective? It's an interesting question. It is very much long-term effective. However, one we've always got to remember, once a pathway has been laid within the brain, there is always potential to go back into that. So, someone who's been, for example, a non-smoker for 50 years, they might hit something, bereavement or something like that shoves them back into that path. There might be reminders of the trauma, that an unexpected reminder of a trauma that might push them back onto the negative way of experiencing. However, the point with EMDR is that it more than likely won't happen. If it does happen, there's something that's been hidden way in the back of the mind that has been kind of sitting there, and whatever it was triggers the access to that. We can never be sure. With EMDR as well, doing it online, doing it face to face, because of the fact that JP was demonstrating earlier on with a pen going backwards and forwards. There we go. the client is looking and watching the pen going backwards and forwards. I will do that with my fingers, or I ask my client to do the butterfly hug. And so it just very much as if they're sitting in front of me, but they're on the other end of Zoom. I often find working with traumatized people that they like working from within their own home environment. Many a time I've had people say to me, yeah, I'm very happy to come to an office, but I would rather do it online and home because I feel safe there. So that's one of the beauties about it. It can be taken through that. And everyone worries, oh my gosh, what about ab reaction? Of course, it's going to be ab reaction, emotional outbursts. But if you've gone through the process with a process of stabilizing the client, doing pre-EMDR work, EMDR, they're going to be able to cope like any therapy, whether you're present online. The NHS is certainly recommending a lot of online therapy now. It's more and more moving towards that what's happening there, and with the Oculus things, the virtual reality, it's already starting to happen. Virtual reality. I was talking to someone the other day about some plans to have virtual reality where the therapist wears their virtual reality goggles, client wears theirs, and they're almost in a room together, but they're in separate sides of the planet, sort of thing. So technology is shifting all of that around. Salia, I will come to your answer that very, very shortly with the about asking whether there's a case study to submit. So well, basically what we're saying here is there is so many ways in which EMDR can work. There are so many ways in which it can be applied to a wide variety of different presenting symptoms. New protocols are opening up all the time. Moira, I'll answer your one as well. So I've got a slide to go through all of those. What we've got to remember is like any and every therapy, it's evolving. It's evolving over time. New things we didn't think it could work with, it does work with. Look at depression and hypnotherapy. When I first stepped into the field of hypnotherapy, you did not touch a depressed client with hypnotherapy with a barge pole. Now it's acknowledged as being a really effective treatment for depression, especially when it's linked in with CBT. So elements that people have said, oh, you can do untold trauma with if you don't do EMDR properly. Well, yes, of course, like any therapy, you will. But if you do it properly, it is the most amazing approach of helping people. It really is amazing. And it's not just, as JP said earlier on, it's not just about doing trauma. I use it a lot with improving well-being, performance enhancement. There are protocols, and we do teach these protocols that look at it slightly different. The amount of movements that we use when we're treating a trauma, we have to reduce the number of movements when we're looking at performance enhancement, because it seems that in any one set of movements, the fewer you do, the more you're accessing positives before you get to the traumatic material. So there's an element there that we can certainly use at setting up for performance enhancement, challenging negative beliefs about a performance, challenging restrictive memories from the past that not necessarily traumatic, but they are holding a performance back, many different things. And as we've had a couple of questions about the training, let me just go in and share my screen and just a little bit about the training that we offer. there you go. It's open. The course is open to all qualified therapists from all psychotherapies here. So whatever background you come from, psychotherapy background, you can work, you can bring hypnotherapy into that. I've also had people who come from naturopathic backgrounds, they have elements of counselling that they bring into that as well. And because we ostensibly originally were just a hypnotherapy training organization, you don't have to be a hypnotherapist to do this. We teach a relaxation protocol that can be taught as used just as a relaxation protocol, or can be incorporated into a hypnosis element. We don't teach any hypnosis on this particular course. And what we do bring into this course, EMDR is very much focused on trauma-based, that's what it's mainly there for. We've also got something that, we just add it for free. You don't have to do it. We've got an online solution-focused therapy element within it, just to bring in some concepts of the other side of it. We don't have to always look at problems. We can look at solutions. So we've got that element in there. But we're also looking at understanding trauma, really getting to know what trauma is, what PTSD is, and so on. So we've got that element within the course, and quite a variety of protocols for EMDR that we're bringing in here. So we teach various EMDR protocols, and it takes place over 4 live weekends with practice and demonstration. And what we're saying with live weekends, we are an international school, it is virtual, and it is practical. It's not just us whittering on. It's a very practical course that we teach. There are 2 midweek 1-hour live lectures looking at trauma, looking at some of the theory behind EMDR. We also record all our live sessions. Now, we record them for people on the course to be able to go back and re-watch the live sessions if they want, not the practice sessions. Practice is, we keep that confidential and private. But any of the bits in the live weekends where we're just generally talking about procedure and protocol, we'll keep a demonstration and you'll be able to watch those. But when you're practicing with each other in breakout rooms, that's not recorded. And also, we're working with therapists. So we also bring up, and it's a great way to see the application of EMDR, to be able to discuss confidentially within the group cases that you might be having and thinking, I wonder if EMDR could work with that. So it's a great way of doing that. We also have the LSCCH Learning Zone, which is basically our Moodle platform, where within that you've got notes, you've got demonstration videos, a lot of online resources for you with regard to every aspect of the course as well. And the exam, we're working with therapists, so we've got a continuous practical assessment. We're observing you, working with you, following that, and giving lots of feedback. But at the same time, at the end of the course, there's an online multiple choice question examination. It's not a very onerous one. It's about making sure you understand the theory behind EMDR. And, we moved online because of COVID, and everyone loved it being online, and being able to have access to an international group of colleagues online, because you've got the opportunity in this multicultural world to be able to explore therapy and share from a variety of different cultural perspectives, which is something that's very, very important with that. And we explore as well, we do talk about, the online approaches, but we will give a lot of information about the face-to-face approaches. We've got a little bit about the technology as well, for those who like the technology. So you get some information about that. And once you've qualified on this, there is an opportunity to join the LSCCH Therapy Centre to help build your practice, to help get further colleagues, to connect with a more international audience as well. So essentially, that's what the course is about. I'm just seeing a couple of questions coming in. One for JP in a moment. I was wondering if Kimberly asked, is there any way to experience CBT and hypnotherapy sessions for depression out there? How would it be like if you could share some experience of your own or someone else? Well, CBT and hypnotherapy, I'll say very briefly, it works really, really well. Want to kind of, I know we're running out of time, so I want to really focus on what we're actually doing with EMDR, but it does work really, really well. What you're looking at is with hypnotherapy, you're gently helping people to focus their mindset a little bit more on a positive way of looking at the future. It's not, analysis and depression doesn't work. Lots of papers out there that's saying that. With the CBT, you're gently challenging restricted beliefs about themselves, about the world around them. And you're doing that within the hypnosis experience. So, so within hypnosis, you're bringing in cognitive behavioral approaches, looking at critical A and all of that, cost-benefit analysis, all of those elements that come in there. And Felicia says, is it recognized internationally? Yes, we've got recognition in Australia, National Council of Integrative Psychotherapists, the BSCH, British Society of Clinical Hypnosis, recognizes it. You can get insurance from having done our course. We know that certainly in the UK, Australia, and Malaysia, you can get that as well. So we've explored all of that. So it's a course that you can do, and it's a course that you can gain insurance for. So you just add it to your schedule. But you will get, obviously, a certificate that says you've done the course. JP, I think there's a question there.
Okay. Yes, yeah. A brief introduction how I came to getting to do the course then. So I had EMDR therapy done, it'd probably be about 8 years ago now, because I had an illness which meant I couldn't work, and I was grieving and didn't know, and I managed to get it through my GP. And back then it was holding rods that vibrated, and the lovely gentleman that did the EMDR for me and things said he didn't understand how it works, he just did. And it was a case of whichever hand vibrated, I would have my eyes closed, but I'd move my eyes to which side. And it worked wonderfully. It's completely outside my arena of experience. And I found it really good, and I'd sort of like forgotten about that. Lockdown happened, and I was busy helping people for whatever came along as I could do, and it popped up into my head that I'd like to train in EMDR, and the universe doing what it does. I Googled LSCCH and found out they had a course coming up in like a month's time, and that's how I came to it, because I'd had it done on me in that form and knew it worked. For the course itself, it was quite a culture shock for me, because it is really there is a protocol to follow, and having so many years of hypnotherapy under my belt, I had become quite anaesthetized in my comfort zone with my way of doing things, and it is a very different approach to doing the work. but the training was fantastic. And after a couple of sessions of practicing and just allowing myself to take it on board as a completely new way of approaching therapy, because it really was, as well as learning the solution focus based. Once it clicked in with me, then that was it. I was up and running with it. There, as Peter's mentioned, it is a practical course, so you will go into breakout rooms, and you and your partner that's in there will work on a something, and it's important that you do that, because that's what I love about all the LSCCH training that I've ever done, is that you get to experience what it's like for yourself. So you know where your brain goes, you know where you feel it in your body, and then you know when things are working. And I think that having that practical experience is actually second to none for when you start having your own clients, because you have an idea of what it's like and how that process can work, and what a difference it can make. But yeah, it was, out of all the training that I've done, for me personally, the one that my head struggled the most with, I remember, I think it's probably my second week. One morning I was just like, no, I don't get this at all. No, I can't do it. And I persevered. And yeah, later on in the day, it was like, oh, got it now. Okay. So it was just that completely different way of working. It never ceases to amaze me whenever I use EMDR, just how quickly it can shift things. And you have no idea of where it's going to go. So as Pete said, we made sure, obviously, the safety protocols out there for the person, so that they know that they are in control. It's same with hypnotherapy, obviously. At any point, they can open their eyes, and it's the same with this. At any point, can raise a hand, just go to a safe space and decide to continue or not at that point. So once you do, because it takes a bit of getting used to. For me, for asking somebody, okay, to go straight to explain that worst moment of that worst moment, because that's what we work on. But once they've done that, then that generally, that's really, once they've even addressed it, if they know it, and then that's it. Then that starts that process of going towards what they've blocked off for so long, that they've pushed away and not been able to face. But where it goes from there, I've had people go from childhood trauma to petting their dog, to running through fields, to being in a car, to wondering why they spent so much time wondering what the problem with their parents was, to like, well, no, it's not, I didn't need their approval. Actually, I just needed to know that I was all right. And it was like, oh, okay. So you have no idea where it's going to go. And it literally is, it is a case of working on the initial thing as a, wherever possible, a viewing it. So they've got a safe bit of dissociation going on. So they're viewing that event. Personally, I can't do that. Years of hypnotherapy, I'm straight in. I tried really hard, but no, it was like, okay, so when I was driving, and I could see that for about a split second, then, oh, there's my legs. And it was like, no, I can't dissociate in that way. So, but it's fine, it works nonetheless. But after that initial set of eye movements, then it is just that pause and like, okay, just let that go. And what comes up next? And literally the brain will just bring another image up. So, and that's what you go with, whatever it is, no matter how random, unrelated. So it isn't a case of, oh, it's gonna be trauma, it's gonna be trauma, it's gonna be trauma, it's gonna be trauma. It doesn't work like that. In my experience personally, having EMDR done lots of times now, thanks to all the practicing, and for the clients that I've worked with, no matter how ingrained, no matter how many years, 60 odd years, they've suppressed this trauma and things on some people, they stick with the trauma. It goes somewhere else. It starts shifting, and it's rapid. I love working in it, and it's tiring on the arm. So I need to look at technology a bit more. So yes, indeed, that would be yes. But it is the course itself, yeah, it's fantastic. So like I say, for me, not realizing I've got quite set in my ways, to come out and learn something, a totally new way of thinking, a totally new way of working, and to go and embrace it and love it. Yeah, I highly rate it. I recommend it. Obviously, else I wouldn't be sat here. So I'd urge you to definitely consider it, therapeutically, for those that it's suitable for, which is a broad spectrum of people. It's fantastic. It really is. Yeah.
There's one thing that you said that I want to pick up on, was about the actual protocol. What we've talked about probably sounds quite straightforward, simplistic. When you look at the protocol, when you first see it and the first time you go through it, it's just like, oh, there's so much. Oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And it looks daunting. Don't worry, we give you what I always say is my idiot guide. I wrote it for myself because, what do I do next? So it kind of goes through. Once you've done the protocol a few times, you notice that there is a rhythm to it, and you pick up on the rhythm. And the first protocol we teach is the basic protocol on which every other protocol is based. So once you've got the main protocol kind of going in your mind, everything else actually, oh right, I can see where we're going with that and why we're doing that, and so on. So an awful lot. And
Yeah.
just noticing the time.
Yeah, sorry, can I just say very quickly as well, part of the protocol, there are rating scales that you do at the beginning and during the process. So you know, as a therapist, that things are starting to shift by a numeric value. Okay, so, and then when we're installing the positive beliefs and things, how they are going from being low to higher. So you've got an actual gauge that is incorporated in with the protocol. It's not guesswork and then hoping they're going to go, oh yes, I'm good now. So no, you can actually see it shifting as the process happens. That is a key difference to anything else that I've ever done before, certainly.
Thank you. Well, look, thank you, everyone, and thank you for attending and allowing us to share. What I'll say is, if you want more information on the course, of course, I think Riska and Adam will be sending some stuff out. There's always visiting our website, LSCCH.UK. Globe, I can't remember, it keeps changing, but hang on, with you in one session, LSCCH.co.uk, and very much look forward to hopefully seeing some of you. Our next course on EMDR starts early March, just so that you know, but I shall leave you in the capable hands of Riska and Adam with regards to that, and look forward to hopefully seeing some of you there, hopefully certainly seeing some of you on more of our free sessions that are coming up, and look forward to just enjoying your company at some point, at some time. Have a lovely time in the afternoon, evening, day, wherever you are in the world. Good night, Australia. Good afternoon or good evening, Malaysia, and good morning, UK. So, and wherever else you are in between, within Portugal, Spain, and Iraq, and everywhere else, and Ukraine, certainly. So, see you all very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.